In this presentation, we will cover emergency contracts for professional services. What is considered an emergency contract? The Chief Procurement Officer or his designee may make or authorize others to make emergency procurements when there exists an imminent threat to the public health, welfare, safety, or public property under emergency conditions as defined in accordance with regulations. Emergency contracts are new contracts and not extensions of a current contract. Submitting an emergency contract to the Office of State Procurement for approval is a two-step process. First, you must submit a shopping cart requesting that OSP grant pre-approval of the emergency contract. Second, you must submit a purchase order requesting final approval of the emergency contract. Step 1 is to submit a shopping cart to OSP. Documents that need to be included in the shopping cart are a justification letter and a draft of the emergency contract in Microsoft Word format. Now we will go over when to request an emergency contract. The two most common scenarios in which agencies submit a request for an emergency contract are 1. When a current contract that resulted from an RFP process has no more extensions available and will end before the RFP process for the next contract is completed. Or 2, when there is no current contract, but a new contract is needed on an emergency basis. In either case, the agency must submit a letter justifying the need for an emergency contract. In the justification letter, the agency should state the specific services that the contractor will provide that are critical to the agency's mission and responsive to an imminent threat to the public health, welfare, safety, or public property under the emergency conditions, in accordance with LARS 39:1598A. The letter should state whether there is an RFP in process, and if so, at what stage. For example, the agency is working on the draft RFP, but the RFP has not yet been submitted to OSP. Or, the agency has submitted the RFP to OSP, and the RFP has been published. If there is no RFP in process, state approximately when the agency anticipates that they will submit the RFP to OSP. Selecting a contractor must be done in accordance with LARS 39:1600E, which requires the agency to negotiate with the highest qualified persons, considering technical competence and compensation for the emergency contracts that are fair and reasonable for the state. Therefore, the agency must provide an explanation of how they choose the contractor for the emergency contract. For example, is the chosen contractor the incumbent of the previous contract? Did the previous contract result from an RFP? Also, confirm that the agency is satisfied with the work performed by the incumbent contractor. If this is a new contract with no prior RFP, the agency should first request informal proposals from at least 3 potential companies able to provide the required services. State the number of informal proposals requested and received, also the names of the companies that were asked to participate and actually submitted proposals. Explain the selection process used by the agency. Provide an explanation regarding the chosen contractor's expertise for this scope of work. The maximum amount of the emergency contract needs to be discussed. Are the rates, prices, and costs being charged the same as those in the previous contract? If not, why not? Confirm that the rates, prices, costs are all reasonable within the industry. The emergency contract draft should be submitted in Microsoft Word format without signatures. Use emergency contract rather than contract where applicable. Remove all references to RFPs, proposers, and proposals. Remove the order of precedence clause because this is not a contract resulting from an RFP. Insert entire agreement clause that states this emergency contract and any exhibits incorporated herein by reference shall constitute the entire agreement between the parties with respect to the subject matter hereof. The purpose of submitting a shopping cart is to request that OSP grant pre-approval for the agency to proceed with an emergency contract. When creating a shopping cart, choose Emergency in the LeGov process type located under Items, Line Number, and Details. Upload the justification letter and draft of the emergency contract. Submit the shopping cart to OSP once it is completed. Once the shopping cart is received, OSP will review the documents. If warranted, OSP will enter the grant of pre-approval in the LeGov approval notes. OSP will also upload the draft emergency contract with any required revisions noted. The agency may then proceed to Step 2 and submit the purchase order. Upon receiving pre-approval, the agency may proceed with revising the emergency contract and obtaining signatures from all parties. The agency will create a purchase order and upload the executed revised emergency contract in PDF format. All other documents as required for contract approval should also be uploaded. The purchase order can then be submitted to OSP for review and approval. If an amendment is needed to the emergency contract, a draft must be submitted for pre-approval. The draft amendment in Microsoft Word format and a justification letter explaining the need for and purpose of the amendment should also be uploaded to the purchase order. The request for the amendment must be uploaded in LeGov prior to the expiration of the original emergency contract. If the agency uploads an amendment requesting an extension of the emergency contract after the term date of the emergency contract, then the agency will need to submit a request for a new emergency contract. This would mean that the agency would start at Step 1. Even though the amendment is now ready for review, you will not submit the purchase order to OSP at this stage. In the LeGov approval notes and by email in Outlook, the agency should notify OSP that the agency has uploaded the justification letter and the draft amendment requesting pre-approval. OSP then will proceed with the pre-approval process. OSP will enter the grant of pre-approval in the LeGov approval notes of the purchase order. OSP will also upload the draft amendment contract with any required revisions noted. The agency may proceed with the finalization of the amendment. Upload the executed revised emergency contract amendment in PDF form. Upload all other documents as required for amendment approval. Finally, submit the purchase order to OSP for final approval. If you have any questions on the material that was covered in this presentation, please contact the Office of State Procurement RFP Team Help Desk at lisa@la.gov.